Well, hello, and welcome to the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about all things Unreal Engine and also Alien versus Predator. We're your hosts. My name is Alex, and
I'm Jacob. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, whatever it is, wherever you are, especially for our listeners. I gotta say, it amazes me how many folks listen to the podcast on the different platforms, particularly Spotify. We apparently have a lot of Spotify listeners. So I guess shout out to you guys this week. We really appreciate your support and everyone's support. So let's get into it. Alex, what's going on this week?
oh boy, all sorts of stuff. The biggest thing that's been on my radar for a little while is MetaHuman Animator. That came out a little over a week ago. And that is something that I've been fortunate to be. I've been beta testing it pretty much since GDC. And the moment I got to play with that myself, I thought this is going to change everything, because so many people, I think, didn't quite believe the GDC demo. It looked like too clean, too perfect. A lot of people thought it was pre-recorded, that nothing there actually happened live. But unlike Apple, Epic still does do things live. And I think everyone's really having their minds blown by how well MetaHuman Animator works with just an iPhone 12 or newer. You need that depth data and Unreal Engine. You're now able to get a level of realism with animation that before would have taken a very, very talented studio. And now you can have people just making very silly animations where they're, talking about their dog and telling a story, and it looks very natural. And the reason I know MetaHuman Animator is working so well is all the tests I've been seeing from the past week is there's a level of joy that is coming out of all of these performances. I'm seeing the virtual performances, and there's this giddiness that I'm seeing on the MetaHumans, and that is the performer. That's the person shining through this digital character in a way that just wasn't possible before, and that's super cool.
Yeah, that is. I when we did our GDC kind of recap, that was definitely one of the things that stood out to both of us. It just really is insane to think of how much complexity it takes out of that process. And I get the feeling like there are going to be a lot of people who enter this field or start using these tools and will probably not even realize how complex some of these things used to be. Or maybe they'll go to a different platform and have to, maybe they'll open up Godot and trying to figure out how they can do something like this. And they'll realize kind of how many amazing features kind of Unreal is packing into this particular feature.
Yeah, 100%. One thing that's really blown me away, and anyone who goes to my YouTube channel will see tons and tons of different videos about MetaHuman Animator there, is the level of detail with just the tongue. I started to notice as I was doing these tests, oh, the tongue isn't just this binary snake flick anymore. There seems to be more going on there. So I did something that made me feel very uncomfortable, which was to put a camera right inside the mouth of my MetaHuman, and it's wet in there and everything. It feels way too realistic. Yeah. And if you just look at the tongue, all the right shapes are happening for all the different sounds you're pronouncing. And a lot of that happens as a pass that's based on the waveform. So it's hearing what you're saying and actually adding in that extra level of detail with the tongue. What you don't get is if you just sit there and go, blah, 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 it won't do the tongue properly for that. But as long as it hears actual sounds coming out, it's remarkably accurate.
So what does it do if you just make random noises? Does it?
It'll follow the mouth, and it might get a little bit of tongue stuff, but not nearly at the level of accuracy when it can figure out the phonetics of what you're saying.
Right, because it's not actually tracking your tongue. It's just
exactly. Yeah, there's no tongue tracking. But there are. I don't know if this was the case before, but once I saw how much the tongue was moving, I was I wonder how many muscles are in there. And of course, there's no muscles, but there are 9 bones inside the MetaHuman tongue now, which is pretty cool.
That's crazy. Yeah, I remember. There was. Well, last episode we talked about the deformation, the skin deformation demo, right?
Yeah.
And the model they had trained for that. Part of that same kind of talk at GDC also went into a little bit about the tongue and kind of how MetaHuman was designed, where they essentially created this human space that you navigate by when you set up your MetaHuman. We also had an episode a while back about the DNA, the MetaHuman DNA, and kind of how that works. And it gave me a new appreciation for it because they took this approach that was very strange. You know, it's not just a bunch of blend shapes. It's not just like a bunch of, you know, like sliders. They're really actually generating this kind of probabilistic space between, you know, real human faces, you know, so they'll have people model faces or scan faces, and all of this data goes into what they're doing. And so like with this tongue demo, like it's clear that this approach has been effective, because now they're able to get this kind of like interesting, you know, byproduct. I'm assuming it's an AI approach. I believe it is.
Yeah, machine learning.
But they're able to do this in such a way that it doesn't seem completely ridiculous, right? Because if you just did kind of what you would expect, where it's just like, oh, predict the position of the tongue, and it wasn't as part of this larger framework, it'd probably just be going all over the place, right? Like it look ridiculous, which is I assume something they were trying to avoid, particularly with tongue tracking. So I think this is really cool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people now, we've all been spoiled with all the love and care that's gone into the face. And now the biggest, like, you know, spoiled child complaint I'm hearing now is like, okay, but what about the body? Like, we need more simple full body tracking kinds of options. And especially, I don't know about if you've actually tried to play more with the deformation demo, but that's not like an easy one to modify or play with. You can't like just take your own MetaHuman and apply those same kinds of heuristics to it. And in fact, anyone who like goes through the documentation or watches the GDC demo will see that like there's a whole like Maya plugin that gets used to like twist the body into all sorts of other positions. And that's still like a fairly manual process.
Yeah.
So we aren't yet at that kind of like one-click solution that we do have on the face side, where we'd say like, okay, here's my body, you know, now let's process that in the cloud with machine learning and have it twist into every conceivable shape it could make, and then have it come back on the other end with all the nice like muscle deformation and cloth deformation that we saw in that demo. That demo, as far as I can tell, like it's really just for viewing. There's not a lot you can do to change it or modify it or play with it, unless you have Maya and you want to dive into all that.
Yeah, I think that I mean, you can kind of see where things are headed, right?
Yeah.
Like you can definitely see that they have a commitment to making these sorts animation in particular, making animation simple, right? I do think in terms of games, like animation is one of the most challenging, if not the most technically complicated, in my opinion, parts of, you know, tech art, so to speak, right? Like there are many parts, and yes, you can go very deep in all of them, and there's many complexities all over the place. But I remember when I was first learning a lot of these tools, animation was always the thing that intimidated me the most, because you need the most kind of most like thorough knowledge of, you know, all these different tools and systems, and then as soon as you try to add additional layers of the complexity, it just balloons into a huge problem. I mean, it really is incredible kind of how much they're simplifying. And like I think that you know, we will get some point in the future where we're able to do full body tracking. I mean, there's folks who are doing this in a kind of different approach, not necessarily 3D, but using like generative AI, you know, companies like Wonder Dynamics, for example, who are out there. You know, you take a video on your phone and they can essentially replace you with some, you know, artificial, you know, CGI, you know, figure in your place. And I think that's extremely exciting. It's going to be fundamentally different than like what Epic's going to do, or what like these more focused tools are going to do. But you can definitely see where things are going.
Yeah, and speaking of where things are going, something that kind of rocked my world the past couple of weeks, there's a company called the Infinite Reality, who I've been working with for a number of years. They were responsible for an Unreal Engine version of Burning Man during the first year of COVID, where the theme of Burning Man that year was actually multiverses. And we've done a number of Unreal Engine projects with them since then. So they asked us a couple of weeks ago if we could help them with a demo they were doing for London Tech Week that was going to have a MetaHuman in kind of a car showroom. This was for Vodafone, and they wanted you to be able to talk to the MetaHuman and get like a fairly natural language response. And
Yeah.
I thought like, okay, this is going to be really weird. And like, how are we going to make this work in VR? And it was surprisingly simple. We were using a plugin called In-World AI. And as soon as we got like, the eyes right, where like the MetaHuman properly looks at you and the body motion is all pretty natural, we even got to a point toward the end where the voice even became much less robotic and much more natural. And I kind of got shivers toward the end of that, because suddenly it's like, this is starting to pass the Turing test. This is starting to feel like something kind of real, and the response time is a lot quicker than something like ChatGPT. So you can actually imagine carrying on a conversation. And by the way, the reason the response time can be so much quicker than something like ChatGPT is that the model itself is much smaller. In this case, this model was trained to know all sorts of things about this car, and you can ask it how fast can it go, how many miles can it get, all that kind of stuff. Tell me about the rims and how they're constructed. And then there were some fun connections inside Unreal, like, can I see the car in blue, and can I see the doors open? And it could like trigger all these different events.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that is so much smaller and faster to process in terms of a machine learning model, compared to something that has to train, compared to something as massive as like all the crazy Skyrim Chat GPT stuff people have been seeing.
Yeah, so we saw a similar demo from NVIDIA back at Computex this year. It was NVIDIA's ACE demo, where they were utilizing like a few different components to do something like what you're talking about. It sounds like you got pretty far down that route, which I think is really cool. I'd love to see this demo at some point.
Yeah, it happened in like a week too. It was so fast.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I mean, so that demo is utilizing like a model for natural language. I think it's Nemo. They're using Riva for like, let's say like speech recognition, so you can like talk in natural voice to the character, and it's using like audio to face in order to, similar to what MetaHuman is doing with the tongue, to then map these like natural language responses back to the NPC, which I think is nuts, right? Like, and that demo is interesting. I think a lot of people were very skeptical of it. They're like, this is definitely scripted. Like, this is definitely a little too on the nose for an NPC to just be gathering. So I mean, I'm assuming that it's all still very early days for their tech stack. But I'm very excited to hear that you kind of got some interesting results already.
Yeah, and the tech stack really is key. Like, it's never just one solution or one piece of software. Like, the reason we were able to get much better voice later on was through 11 Labs. And so, yeah, you start to combine like audio to face and all these other elements, so that it becomes as natural as possible. And as long as all these things can share common protocols and all have plugins for Unreal, the way you can start to have them, amplify each other and make a more natural experience is really incredible. And just the speed of all that, like a year ago, I wouldn't have thought this would all be possible in such a quick and kind of seamless way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is pretty insane to see this. And we've talked about AI a bunch on this podcast. And I know it's for some folks, divisive. Actually, this is interesting and maybe a bit of a sidetrack, but this came up recently. Did you hear about the Marvel intro for what is it called? AI. It's for a new movie that came out, Secret Invasion.
Secret Invasion. Yeah, it's all AI, right?
It was this AI generated intro to the movie and pissed everyone off.
Mad. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you're replacing VFX artists. Meanwhile, like, this is Method Studios, so it's a VFX shop who got paid for this, right? And it's a big VFX shot, so it's not like they just took some prompt engineer off the street or some shit like that, right? They paid a VFX shop to do this, and they came back with this intro because they thought it was an interesting take, where they were saying, oh, well, AI is going to kind of morph these characters and faces together. It's going to be kind of, you're not really going to know what you're looking at, and it kind of fit the theme of the movie. And they're like, let's use this as an opportunity to experiment with this technology, and everyone just went up in flames, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm definitely on the side of, as usual, like the people who are getting paid to do the work. And like you said, no one was taken off the street by this. I thought it was a very interesting use of Midjourney. It's for the there goes my face. That's a good frame to freeze in. I thought it was a very good use of Midjourney, and it feels like it makes sense in the show. I think that being able to have artists curate and still make key creative decisions while using this tech as a tool, that's the important thing. Where it becomes a problem is when it's a producer who's like, yeah, we don't want to pay a VFX studio, so we will do this instead.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And this was the concern with, like, for example, the writer's strike that's ongoing. Like, oh, well, does this, so there, for people who don't know, there's a Hollywood writer's strike going on right now. And in a lot of studios, this is a problem. But part of the reason they're striking is because of the influence that AI is playing now in their industry, with the concerns that, are they going to replace writers with, natural language AI that can generate, for example, scripts based on, scripts that have been made in the past, right? Because you can think of a long episodic series, with many seasons and lots of writing behind it. It's not inconceivable that you could generate many new episodes scripts based off of that much, content and data. So I do think it is a real threat for writers out there. I do think it could be a tool to enable them too, just like any other writer. I think it's great for writer's block, or, I certainly can say for like programming it, the kind of writer's block of programming where you're just sitting there, you don't know how to start a problem. Like, AI is great for that. My hope is that, folks see tools like, Midjourney in this case, but also, MetaHuman and tongue, the tongue animation. You don't think about it being AI. You just think, wow, that's so awesome. I don't have to think about animating a tongue anymore. I didn't want to do that anyways, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, the sorts of use cases people should be focusing on, more than, people experimenting or, whatever else it is.
Yeah, and certainly, the biggest problem that I have, at least with a lot of the AI stuff happening, is just the fact that no one who helped create the learning models that these are all based on is getting compensated in any way. And I think we did talk about this a little bit in another podcast, but the fact that, NBC could decide to do like a Friends revival and be like, oh yeah, we're not going to hire any writers. We'll just have it train on all the previous Friends episodes and generate a bunch of new content. Like, that's a really straightforward example where it's like, okay, well, that is only possible because of everyone who helped write the previous Friends episodes. And yet the way things are set up right now, there's no need to compensate them at all.
Yeah, I think this is an obvious problem. I mean, think about some of the problems we have, beyond this in today's day and age. And one of the ones that people forgot about very quickly is, crypto and NFTs, right? Like, what was the debate around crypto and NFTs? It was, oh, well, you don't have to compensate the original artist if you go out and sell an NFT of the Mona Lisa or whatever, right? Like, it's the same argument in the sense that, like, okay, well, we have fundamental issues with intellectual property rights on the internet. A lot of content has been posted and shared in places that are public, and that data has been consumed and digested by millions of people, as well as very large companies who have other interests, right? Like, this is a fundamental problem that we have in general. Like, the fact that you can find a high quality photo of the Mona Lisa, was not a problem 20 years ago. It just really wasn't, right? Because no one went around sharing their photos of Mona Lisa. Like, search engines were very young. Like, it was not something that was useful, right? So, like, we have some fundamental problems here. And I don't think any one technology is to blame for them. Like, I don't think NFTs are to blame for this. I also don't think AI is to blame for the same problems. Like, there has to be some solution that, yes, you have to compensate the people who made the content. Like, you have to compensate the ideas. Like, the regulation though is just so far behind it, right? And it's such a can of worms where it's like, once the cat's out of the box, you can't go back, right? Like,
yeah. Oh yeah, no one is going to stop AI. So yeah, the regulation side is really important. The WGA is asking for things like, okay, like, yeah, AI is going to be here, but like, you still need to hire writers, like kind of like what we're talking about with the Secret Invasion title sequence. Like, still there needs to be someone who is the same kind of person you'd be hiring even without AI, and they are at least shepherding this through the process. The main thing that makes me nervous is like, right now, and maybe for the foreseeable future, like there's always a little hint of something being off whenever you see or read anything written by AI. But
Sure.
I think we forget that a lot of people like a lot of, for lack of a better term, comfort food, something that feels familiar, something that doesn't require too much, thought process and brain power. So I think maybe the HBOs or the Maxes of the
Yeah.
world are kind of safe for a while because they're trying to make prestige content that has like a level of writing a la Succession. And I think we're a long way from any AI being able to produce an episode of Succession at that level of quality. But for, 60% of kind of the run of the mill television and even movies to a certain degree that you do see, I think it is believable that we're going to get to that point where it's like, yeah, an AI can get something not too far off from what's being made right now because it has so much familiar content to base that off of. And that's what I always think of with AI. AI is very good at, feeding off of other human made things and saying, I can make a thing like that too. I made this, like the meme.
Right.
But whenever you need something novel, whenever you need something that is going to be pushing the bar in some kind of way, it can't really do that. It can inspire a human to do that, but it can't really do it on its own.
Yeah, I saw a pretty interesting thread, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it here, but I saw a pretty interesting thread on Twitter about some folks who had like tried to kind of work some of these models into essentially responding to the prompt, like create a new art style or some new art form, right? And like the responses it got back were interesting, but fundamentally they're not any more valuable than anyone else's ideas, right? Like, yeah, it might be like, I think one of the ideas were like, it's like AI like imitation art, where it's like a human creates like some piece of art that is meant to imitate the kind of comical style or some meme of AI art, right? Like, that's an interesting idea. I mean, that's certainly not something I had thought of. It doesn't mean no one's thought of it, of course, and I have no way of verifying that. But that's the same with any art. So okay, that's fine. But does that mean I would go to see an exhibit on it? Oh, well, I don't know. Like, not if the AI had come up with the idea and made it. That would not make it interesting anymore. Like, that's the whole point, right? Yeah. Like, there are fundamental things about art that you just can't measure that way. And it's also, to the extent that humans are still the primary consumers of AI models, and the future is a scary place, who knows? But like, as long as humans are the primary consumers of AI models, we get the final judgment as to what is valuable to us.
Yeah.
And we have the dollars to pay for it, right? Like,
I saw an article recently as well that showed like just the complete cluster of what happens when AI starts to feed on other AI. Like, it really does need that human input to make it actually interesting and novel. And if without us, it's not a good world for the robots left behind. So at least we need to end up like the world of the Matrix, where we're all sitting there as batteries, where we're like having dreams or something, and it's like taking all the ideas from our dreams and feeding off of that.
Right. Exactly. We need, hive mind is the eventual system. I think it's super easy to get bogged down in doomsday scenarios with this, but it's fundamentally it's a technology like any other. And this is a story that's played out many times with anything that is new or interesting, right? Like, people thought TVs were going to brainwash you and turn you into mindless zombies. And these things happen, and technology is scary because we don't understand it usually when it first arrives. But we fundamentally don't know what the limits are, and to speculate, is probably not useful. But also, to completely disregard it or call it evil, I think is also a mistake.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get back to some Unreal Engine stuff. Oh, but first, before we get back to Unreal Engine stuff, I have a new prediction to make regarding our friend, the Apple Vision Pro and Unity, because here's what happened. I was actually at Unity's office in New York City this week for a very cool event that was very interesting, because I was at an Epic event like the week before. I can say Epic is much better at feeding people, because the Unity office was like completely out of food after 10 minutes.
Wow.
But I got to talking to some people there about Apple Vision Pro and Unity and Unreal and all that kind of fun stuff. And I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm thinking, especially now that I've actually opened up Unity for the first time in a little while and played with the simulator that Apple released to basically say, like, here's what it'll be like to actually, work with an Apple Vision Pro. It's even better than the Magic Leap simulator that came out in 2018. Really makes you feel like you understand how your content will work in a different room. And the conclusion I've come to for the moment, I've still, we're only a couple weeks out from the initial Apple announcement, is it is unlikely that Apple will actively block Epic from creating a plugin for the Apple Vision Pro.
Yep.
But I do think they are going to make it much, much, much easier for Unity to have an excellent plugin and excellent tools. And there's going to be a lot more first-party support there. And in fact, if Apple really wants to make Epic angry, I think that's kind of the way you do it, actually, because if you just say like no Epic, no Unreal Engine stuff allowed at all, then Epic and lots of people get to be like very indignant and like, what the heck? And there's actually grounds for like legal action and all that kind of stuff there. But if Apple's like, oh yeah, sure, like here's all the raw materials you need to do all the stuff with our headset, go wild, but we're not going to help you at all. Then you suddenly have the situation where anything being made with Unreal is just at a fundamental disadvantage. And we actually see this even today. There are certain plugins or certain tools, certain hardware that just works a lot better on Unity or Unreal, and you can feel that disparity. So already seeing like how incredibly built out the Unity ecosystem is already for the Apple Vision Pro, it's easy for me to see this future where it's just 10 times easier to develop something for the Apple Vision Pro, and you will be able to do it with Unreal, but it's going to be such a grind, and I think that'll frustrate people.
Yeah, I think I think that's fairly similar to what my reaction was initially. I mean, like, there are grounds for legal action. They can't prevent folks using a specific tool from developing it. It doesn't make sense. They can block Epic, of course. I think I mentioned is like I do think they can say Epic can't publish anything on Apple Vision Pro. Like they have the right to do that. They did that with Fortnite, right? They have to have grounds for it still, otherwise that's anti-competitive. But they could. I think Unity was their partner from the start. They came prepared. I would love to try the simulator. Can you tell me more about it? I am kind of curious to hear what the experience is like, because I haven't opened up Unity and tried anything like that.
Yeah, so fortunately, someone at my company has an old MacBook that they just installed it on, and we're all kind of logging into it because it does require Xcode. It requires Unity 2022. There's like very specific versioning for everything. But the fundamental idea is you can actually, turn on a room and you can configure the room in different ways and like test out triggering different kinds of inputs and actions and see your content inside of that room. Fundamentally, it's very similar again to the Magic Leap simulator, where I linked a couple episodes back, or actually in the last episode, a tutorial I'd made like a couple days after the Magic Leap simulator came out, and this is kind of doing the same thing, but it's done in the Apple way. It's done with a lot of polish. You can tell that Apple has been giving Unity like a lot of I want to say runway to produce these things because they feel very thought out. It doesn't feel like a rush to the simulator market like Unity was trying to
I think Unity needed this opportunity, based on where they were. So I do think that this was a very important thing for them. And I'm excited. I mean, look, I haven't touched Unity in a long time. I probably still won't pick up Unity just for this. We're not changing the name of the podcast anytime soon. But I do think it's interesting. I fundamentally though, like, Apple has made it clear that the gaming market is not their focus for this device, right? And Unreal has never been about productivity applications for me, personally. And we did get confirmation about WebXR.
Yeah,
I do think that's a way better delivery mechanism for games, anyways, given the battery life of this device, the resolution it's running at. So, for me, I think it makes more sense that to just if you're going to develop content in Unreal and you want it to work on Apple Vision, I don't think you should run and buy a MacBook with Xcode just to do it. I don't think a lot of people will make that choice personally. Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people who want to do productivity, who want to do very specific kinds of applications, I'm sure they will, and it will be a market. But they made it clear that the folks that they are going to highlight are on the productivity side. They're on the, you know, the things we saw about communication and social, right? Like they're very focused on that, and they'll let Meta hold, you know, the crown for gaming while they kind of work out who their user base is and figure out if, you know, fully immersive games even make sense for them or
Yeah,
their
I mean,
consumers.
all that being said, I mean, I find it hard to believe that if someone comes out with a really novel use of gaming for the Apple Vision Pro, a la Beat Saber on Meta Quest, that
Yeah.
Apple wouldn't, you know, promote the hell out of that. Like, you know, anyone who has an Apple Vision Pro, which at first is probably only going to be like 100,000 people or so, Apple's going to want to find any excuse to get people excited about using that device or buying it if it isn't selling as well as they hope. So,
Yeah.
you know, I wonder if they would like really try to narrow their vision down to just saying the productivity market.
I think that well, remember, there are no controllers.
Yeah.
Right. So most of these games are just really not fit for this. Like
But
Beat
there's no
Saber,
reason that
sure,
they're
you can wave your hands around, but like I don't think that accomplishes the same goals
yeah.
that did with, you know, other headsets. And I personally don't know how good the hand tracking is, you know, behind your head and all of the different positions that, you know, we don't know. That was the whole point of the controllers with, you know, the haptic, or sorry, the gyroscopes in them for when they're behind your back, is to estimate those positions. The Apple headset has none of that, right? So there's a whole lot of gaps here that I don't see how it crosses, and I don't see where they paid attention to the gaming market in the device. And I think personally there will be games just like there were games on iPhone, you know, when it first came out, but it will be about the ecosystem and, you know, the professionals and the folks that Apple typically tailors its devices to, in my opinion.
I'm glad we're disagreeing because I can't wait in like a year to
Yeah.
check in and we can see how everything played out.
Yeah.
Because my quick rebuttal to that is we already know Apple has a nice partnership with like Sony. PlayStation controllers work well with iPhones, and that'll probably continue to be the case here. I'm sure there are going to be third-party accessories and peripherals. I keep imagining, because people keep saying like, well, I wish there was like more haptic feedback. I could imagine something as simple as like a thimble that goes.
I just want my
over, like,
Apple Watch to have haptic feedback.
Apple Watch would be great. Yeah, you mentioned that last episode. I think that would be awesome.
Pinch and
I'm
vibrate.
sure someone will come up with a really cool game idea that somehow integrates the Apple Watch or the iPhone. The haptic feedback from that could be great. And I'll even just propose like a really dumb idea that could potentially be fun entirely within the ecosystem of what they have. Your Cyclops, your Cyclops from X-Men, and you literally just look at things and you zap them every time you tap your finger, and it could be like a fun version of Duck Hunt, you know, if the eye tracking is that good.
I see that. I still feel like that's fundamentally different than like the way Meta, you know, talks about games and gaming. Like they're targeting a market that plays like Call of Duty all day on PC, whereas Apple, even if they do games, they're going to be targeting people who play mobile games on iPhone.
Sure.
And I think that is a bit of a different market, though. You might be right that maybe that becomes a focus for them in the future. I personally don't see, you know, that focus playing out. I think they have too much to figure out within their operating system and the different, you know, best practices that they need to kind of enforce for this device to work well, versus the clusterfuck that I keep swearing a lot on this podcast. I was told I swear too much. I'm sorry. I work all day with folks from Jersey. Okay, you know, this is how
that
it
explains it. Yeah.
Like, you know, Meta, they put out the device, they still tailored the, you know, they kind of had to skim off the app store with you know, with a lot of you know, carefully chosen apps, and yet it didn't really work because the sideloading community said we don't want any of that. You know, like there was a lot of conflict there. I think Apple doesn't want that drama. I think they want to focus in on the use cases that, you know, folks who buy, you know, MacBooks or higher end consumer devices are interested in, because this is an expensive device. This isn't like an iPhone, you know, R or whatever they call the like cheap iPhone, right? To play mobile games, this is an expensive device. I think it tailors towards the professional community. They're calling it the Vision Pro. right? Which is, indicative of that, direction. I
Like
think
an iPhone Pro.
yeah,
Like
I think
iPad
they
Pro.
have very interesting partners that they can work with. You mentioned Sony. They have the controller in a few of their demos, PlayStation controller, and you get to play a game. They're going to use, Sony's streaming service so you can play your PlayStation on your Apple Vision Pro, and I think that'll be sweet.
Virtual screen.
But that is a virtual screen, right? Which is, again, going back to not really what Meta is. It's not a fully immersive 3D game. It's not, all the kinds of content that we've seen in the past, which is, it might not be better, but it's different, right? Like I feel like this is going to be a fundamentally different device than what we've seen in the past with AR VR.
Yeah,
maybe not fundamentally different from like Magic Leap or like Vario and some of those, in terms of who they're targeting and what they want to do with it. But certainly from, the Quest series, I think this is going to be fundamentally different.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, let's run through a few more Unreal Engine things of note. The 5.2.1 hotfix was released, which is nice. As usual, there's some good bug fixes in there. The one that caught my eye that I'll give a shout out to is, pardon me, lots of suspense for this. The Matrix City sample demo, the traffic and the people had all broken at runtime in editor. And I actually ran into that personally trying to do a test of some of the new Lumen features in 5.2. And that's fixed now. So anyone who wants to play with the city sample, that's great. Speaking of samples, and actually one very similar to the city sample, the one that was demoed at GDC that they're calling the Electric Dream sample is released. With one minor little detail, it does not have the Rivian. Jacob, how does that make you feel?
I'm very sad about that because I really wanted to drive around in the Rivian because I want a Rivian personally.
Sure.
It was
you
good
and I
marketing.
Both got to hang out in one for a hot second.
Well, actually, no, you did.
Oh, you didn't do it?
No, if you remember clearly, you were having a good time. Whatever. This is a story for another time. But I want a Rivian. They announced this week that they're going to add compatibility for Tesla chargers. So I'm all in on Rivian. And now I can't drive one virtually or in real life. And I'm out of luck.
Yeah. I would have paid something for Rivian.
Yeah, me too.
Like, yeah, here's our actual vehicle and you can drive around it virtually. And this is exactly how it feels. If you want to put on a VR headset and use a virtual steering wheel, like you're in Gran Turismo, perfect simulator.
Yeah, I'm assuming they have their own plans for interactive, virtual Rivian demos. I think that's a cool pixel streaming concept for them. But yeah, I am disappointed, but I am excited to hear that demo's out because it's the PCG stuff. I'm very interested in something I really want to play with. You did get a chance to open it up and mess around?
Yeah, I had it running in the background right before the podcast started because what I wanted to test was, what if I just say add content or feature pack and I bring in the automotive sample? Can I at least drive around to see, if it feels anything like the demo they're shown at GDC? But unfortunately, and I haven't tried this very much yet, but when I switch over to the car mode, the car drops down, it's in the scene, I can turn the wheels, I can rev the engine, but the car isn't moving. So there might be some collision.
It's probably like the weight or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Some gravity or
the cars are definitely harder to modify than say like the third person character. Like I was making a game with my kids where it was like they were like, make the person run faster, and like that was very easy to like just modify the max speed and like the person can run much faster. For a car, the car in Unreal out of the box is based on like actual physics and mechanics and throttle and torque, and so there's like a lot more fine tuning you need to do if you want car go fast now.
Yeah, I mean, you also have to like understand cars, and that's beyond my pay grade, right?
You have to change the sizes of the gears inside like the blueprint component, and it's like smaller, faster, I don't know.
Yeah, that's too much. I would be excited to if you figure that out to drive it around. I mean,
I did test it in VR. I literally did the same thing I just described with the automotive pack, and I do this with a lot of things now. I did it with the Hillside demo, I've done it with the Matrix demo, where I'll just say add feature or content pack, VR, sample, make it VR mode, enable OpenXR, and then just see if it can run. And mind you, it does really help to have an RTX 4090 to do this, but it ran and it was pretty good. And it feels amazing just flying around this beautifully lush, detailed environment and just being able to get really close to things. This is why it is really nice when possible to have Lumen and Nanite on in VR instead of the traditional forward shading, baked lighting scenario, is just to be able to go up to like, you know, here's a branch and it's casting this like ornate shadow on the super detailed rock that has moss and like some berries. And it just feels so realistic that is really something special.
Yeah, no, that is pretty cool. I'm jealous that you've gone to open it all, but really I want to get into the PCG stuff and because that scene just looks incredible.
Yeah,
and it doesn't look like it will run. So it looks too good. It's like one of those things because we never got like the Lumen in the Land of Nanite original demo, right?
which one was, oh, you mean like with like the tons of statues and the big open
Yeah.
I don't think we did
never got I mean, I'm assuming it was a huge project, like there was a file size huge.
They definitely took pieces of it for the Valley of the Ancient demo, but that was different. You know,
I would have loved to get that demo, but this demo looks almost just as good with all the foliage and everything else, and the fact that it's procedurally generated, I think it's just so cool.
Yeah, so it's about 60 gigabytes. And also to relate it back to the Matrix City sample, they also do like here's the giant map if you want to open that. And if your computer is like, not so ready for that, then you can open up a smaller map that is a little bit more feasible. And the documentation also runs through like, here's how you can change the screen percentage and all these other settings just to help it perform a little bit better if that's what you need. So I have actually gotten not this one, but like the Matrix demo to run on my laptop, which is like much less powerful. And so you just have to know like what settings to fine tune and tone down. And also, I'll just give a quick shout out for anyone who's in VR. And especially if you're trying to use something like the spectator camera to make something look really cool, maybe you're doing a recording, maybe you're doing a presentation, just crank down VR.pixel density. The default is 1. It's inside the VR pawn by default as a console command. If you crank that down to like 0.3 or 0.4, it's going to look not great in VR, but it's going to look amazing to everyone who's watching your screen. So keep that in mind.
That's cool. That's a good pro tip.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of shout outs this week. Do we want to get into it? We're getting
right before we do shout outs, just a couple more quick announcements. NVIDIA DLSS 3 is finally out for Unreal Engine. That's been a long time coming. I think a lot of us were feeling frustrated when we were seeing Unreal Engine Games announcing like, hey, it now supports DLSS 3. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a big live stream about DLSS 3 in Unreal Engine 5.2. And finally now, as of a couple of days ago, it's available. It has, frame generation. It has some pretty crazy super sampling. If you're using it in VR, it does not have the frame generation, but I see people getting really upset about that. I think that's actually okay, because if you're using any VR SDK from Meta or Vario or Vibe or anyone else, that already has frame generation built in. And I would imagine the DLSS version would probably conflict with it. So anyways, I played a little bit with the DLSS 3 stuff and it's feeling great. At least as good as DLSS 2 in VR, if not a little bit better. So very cool to see that finally out and about.
Yeah, very cool. I DLSS 3 is very interesting. I played around with it briefly in Cyberpunk. I think we mentioned on a previous episode, Cyberpunk released their like brute force ray tracing method. I can't remember what they call it. And it's super cool. And I have a 4090 here and I was pumping up all the settings and I wasn't hitting 60 frames a second. So I was like, oh, well, let me try out DLSS 3. And it was not good. I was getting like an extra 30 milliseconds of delay when moving the mouse. I was getting more frames, but they were coming too late. So I was like, I guess if your GPU is maybe over some threshold, it doesn't work, or maybe it uses RT cores, or there's something going on there. But I wasn't getting great results there. So I'm curious to hear if you got decent results inside of Unreal with it.
Yeah, and I was just in the editor. I haven't tried it in a package build or anything like that. Are you referring to the overdrive mode in Cyberpunk?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I actually just played Cyberpunk for the very first time
Really?
a little while ago. Yeah, in a previous podcast, I was shouting out the the VR injector for Unreal that'll be coming out for the
Right.
public in not too long. And very generously, Alex Nicholas inside that Discord channel had given me access to his Steam library, and it was to test things out in VR. And he owns Cyberpunk, so I hopped into his game save and was very impressed at how good it looked, both in regular mode but also inside VR.
That's pretty cool. I would love to play that game in VR. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah, everyone should be really excited about this injector. It's making incredible progress. There's new games being added all the time. It's still this little kind of private beta tester community, but I know they're really eager to make it more public soon.
Yeah, that's really cool. But that's not Unreal Engine game. Cyberpunk.
Oh, okay. Well, I must have been using another modder then, because there's also different mods. Because in that Discord, it's called Flat 2 VR, and so there's all sorts of games there that are set up to work with VR modes, and so some of them have their own custom download setups, and then some of them are using specifically just the general version or a specific version of this Unreal Engine to VR mod. But of course, yeah, Cyberpunk wouldn't be in Unreal Engine yet, because the big announcement was CD Projekt Red saying that they are now using Unreal for the next version of The Witcher, and that I believe will be their first meaningful usage of Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah, I think that I think they had most of the DLSS features in like Hogwarts Legacy, for example, which was an Unreal game. Yeah. But as we spoke on that episode about it, it was not a good game visually. It was not a good Unreal Engine game out of Unreal Engine games. So I don't even know if I touched those settings at the time, but
yeah, I can say it looks really good in VR. There are a couple weird little artifacts where your left eye and your right eye are seeing something different. But I think we also know for sure that Hogwarts Legacy was made in like 4.26 or something like that. So certainly not using the latest features from Unreal.
It seemed like they were definitely using Nanite, because I saw I saw the Nanite debug view.
Oh, you did say
while
that.
I was playing the game. Again, I don't know how these debug views got into the game in the first place, like debug arrows and like why they were shipping debug builds. It's unknown to me, but I did see Nanite debug view in the game.
That's funky. Internet says that it was made with Unreal Engine 4, so I wonder if that was like some weird injection of like Nanite or something like that.
They can backport things, right? I mean,
if it's a custom build of the engine, yeah, they could fork it and like kind of do their own thing.
I would assume it's customized in some way, but
yeah, cool. Okay, let's do a few quick shout outs. Just pulling up my document. I've been looking at a ton of MetaHuman content. I've made a couple videos that have been trying to help the MetaHuman community. I saw people were having some trouble with things like getting your head to stay attached to the body, with the head rotation to continue to work once you've attached to a body. And so I tried to make some content to help with that. People have been very generous, saying it has helped them. And I've had a lot of people sending me the results of what they have made. And I thought I would just show a couple of little examples. I'll share my screen for anyone who's watching the video podcast. So I thought this was pretty cool. This is a custom MetaHuman animation that looks, of course, like a Navi from Avatar. Nice hair and everything there. And even with the audio off, like if you just look at the lips and the detail of like how the lips come together with the mouth, and if you peek into the tongue, that stuff is all really impressive. And for anyone who remembers, like with Livelink Face, just getting the lips to close properly was always something that would feel a little bit unsettling if someone like never quite closed their mouth.
Right.
So yeah,
that looks amazing though.
Yeah, that looks so much better than it did. I also want to give a shout out to my friend Jay from JS Films, who's been also doing these great like lip syncing tests where he'll just take, a song. I mean, he's been rapping too, and actually rapping, which looks really good, but he'll take these really nice songs and just set up like a simple environment and just do some like really emotional lip syncing. Wow. And that stuff turns out really well. I also, just to run through these shout outs really quick too, because we're doing pretty good, coming up on an hour. Style 3D is a plugin I've been seeing more and more of lately. And I've seen this person called Maya Expert on YouTube, who's been doing some really cool stuff. And like, there's so much detail here with everything moving. I believe this is real time or nearly real time. So to have all this stuff moving like the fabric it actually is in a natural way is super cool. I'm eager to play with that Style 3D plugin. I also wanted to shout out, yeah, this is a really good use of a stylized MetaHuman. So this was done with Midjourney, basically a blank model of the head, then, sent over to Midjourney and everything mapped to it. And I like this because everyone thinks about MetaHumans as being like super photorealistic. And this feels like very stylized, and yet it is still taking the same face data and, getting it out to these blend shapes correctly.
So you can apply your own custom textures to MetaHumans? I wasn't even aware that that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, over in Unreal, like you're not going to see it over in MetaHuman Creator, but once you bring it back into Unreal, you can do whatever you want. So Midjourney has been a place I've seen a lot of people creating content for Unreal that I'm like kind of okay with, because it's like, oh yeah, it's textures. Like you're just getting everything to map easily, and you're kind of jumping over those technical hurdles to just have something that is already UV mapped correctly, and it's kind of literally drag and drop. Like you take the texture, drop it on your character, and it's going to look pretty good. Yeah. And then I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole with this user Locodrome, who I just discovered with this. And I found this amazing video that actually was pretty popular about 6 months ago, where he took the opening to Top Gun Maverick, which is also the opening to the original Top Gun. And he went ahead and did like a Rogue Squadron thing from Star Wars. And he does a shot for shot recreation of that opening with Danger Zone and everything playing. And it's just all these X-Wing pilots like blasting out into space. And I just thought this was such a fun homage to Star Wars and Top Gun. And it's really good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, everything with the metahumans and the characters, and just to get all the shots to line up correctly, all the depth of field is matching things as well. And I don't think he's using any original audio, like the song and all the sound effects of like planes taking off from Top Gun. I think he's using literally all of that here, so he has to make it all match and feel right. Since of course we all know an X-wing doesn't typically sound like an F-14 or whatever they're using in Top Gun.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, cool stuff. Let me just make sure there weren't anything else here I wanted to mention. No, those are the major ones. And then just there's tons and tons of MetaHuman Animator content coming out. Like I'll just literally Google MetaHuman Animator right now or YouTube it, and I bet I can find someone doing a cool one. Okay, here's You Can't Handle the Truth.
Oh, they just trained it on like a video from a movie or something.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So you got a horse. Cool. There's ET. All done with MetaHuman Animator. That's pretty cool.
Well, how are they doing that? Or how are they getting the depth from it?
They're using something called MetaM. Or no, Meta. I mean, this all says MetaM. I don't know what that is though. But yeah, it seems like somehow they're
getting depth data from the.
Oh. So they actually take like Jack Nicholson's face and
they're projecting it onto a.
Yeah. Well, that's something I'll have to spend more time looking at. And speaking of textures, here you go, Jacob, just for you. Here's an entire video from Bad Decision Studios that's all about doing custom MetaHuman textures.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, with like substance, like deformation. Oh, that's nice.
Fun stuff.
I heard a lot of I mean, this is maybe a topic we need to do a deep dive on Substrate at some point.
Oh yeah, I'd love that. I want you to teach me about Substrate.
Maybe I can find someone who knows more than I do too. There's a few folks who I've spoken to who, particularly in the VFX sphere, who think that it really unlocks quite a bit of functionality for the engine that just wasn't possible before in terms of visual fidelity and what you can do with it. So yeah, we should do a deep dive on that. Maybe bring on a special guest to supplement my lack of time to play around with the engine, which is what I'm very jealous of all our listeners who hopefully use as much time as possible to play with Unreal Engine, because that's what I would be doing if I didn't have a job.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, me too, for sure. One other shout out I just remembered I wanted to show is a good little use of pixel streaming. This is using something called kernel.world. But it is from my friends over at the Unbuilt Gallery, which is kind of an architecture gallery of virtual space. Jacob, you are also connected to these folks. And the last time I saw their pixel streaming, it was like a little bit janky, and this is much smoother. So it seems like on their website right now, unbuilt.xyz, you can get a pretty good pixel streaming experience that just kind of works out of the box now. And I'm kind of curious to learn more about the services they're using.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. And the way the gallery is set up is you just go and you enter into these different artists' worlds, or if you click on them, then you have the gallery where you see the pictures of everyone's work, and then you can actually go into their like little Unreal Engine world that is specific
very cool.
to what they've made. And it's very responsive, very low latency, and looks good. You know, I am on my RTX 4090, but if I was on a Chromebook or something like that, in theory, it would also look very good.
Yeah, awesome.
By the way, quick Lumen discovery I made, and I'm embarrassed it took me this long, and I'm sure this is documented somewhere, but I love having emissive materials. As soon as I saw the first previews of Lumen, I was like, I want all my spheres and everything to be emissive. That can cause crazy Lumen artifacts. I suddenly noticed the other day, actually while teaching my VR course, that as soon as I turned off all my emissive materials, but still had regular lights that were Lumen lights, like all the little firefly and, you know, weird caustic compression artifacty kind of things in my scene basically went away. So just a random tip that maybe everyone knows except me, but I figured I'd share it just in case not.
Yeah, I'd love to know why emissives are different than other lights, but I guess I have to imagine it's a different process to trace those.
Yeah, because they don't have like
non-uniform.
actual, you know, candela values the way that real lights do. It's, you know, it's literally just like you're multiplying into your emissive slot, and it's that bright.
Yeah, I mean, so like emissives in like deferred rendering, like standard deferred rendering are very simple because they typically don't cast shadows. And if they do cast shadows, it's a post-process or it's an extra pass, which is why you typically don't want emissives casting shadows. I don't know how they do it with Lumen. I would be intrigued. It might be like an actual just ray trace that they run off of it, which would make sense for the noise that you would get, because most of Lumen is using the what's it called? The oh my god, the skin cache thing.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, this is gonna kill me now. Essentially, you get all right, I got it. All right, let's move on here. But
sure.
Yeah, yeah, we got to do a deep dive on Substrate. Maybe we should do a deep dive on I don't know if we've really done a full deep dive on Lumen since it's gotten all these updates. We should really do some. Let us know in the comments if you're interested in us doing a deep dive on some of these things. I think it'd be pretty interesting. Distance fields, the global distance field. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. So global distance fields is like, it's a map that essentially describes how far away anything is from some surface in the virtual world. And my understanding is that Lumen utilizes that to a great extent to map shadows, but I'm assuming with emissives, they might have to trace individually against that, which would go back more similar to what you would get from like the old, you know, ray tracing inside of Unreal, which is probably why it looks kind of similar. So I think it's very interesting.
Right. Yeah. And I remember too teaching back in 4.27 with mesh distance fields that we would usually describe that as a way to get like kind of fake ray traced rendering, because it did do a very nice job of creating something that looked a lot like ray tracing, but it is much cheaper. And of course, that's why it makes sense that would become such a key part of Lumen as well. By the way, speaking of teaching, because Jacob, you also went through the whole authorized instructor program. Did you know that there's now like a new authorization people can go through?
Oh no, is it like a higher level? Like,
so technically you and I and most of the people we know from the teaching side of Epic, we're authorized to teach Unreal Engine 4. We don't technically have an authorization for Unreal Engine 5.
They did not do that.
They've made a new thing you can go to, but I haven't found time for it yet because it takes like 90 minutes, but you can get certified in Unreal Engine 5 now and just get like a nice new little badge. They were very clear in the emails, like, you don't have to do this. We're not going to like, you know, revoke anything from you if you don't do it. But if you would like to have a nice thing that says like UE5 authorized instructor, then you can get that if you want.
I guess if you either want to learn UE4 or you don't look at my description too hard, then I can teach you.
Yeah, exactly. Man,
That's pretty funny.
that's funny.
All right.
I have to ask real quick, Jacob, are you
Yeah.
going to Unreal Fest in October?
I most certainly will.
Great.
I did propose a talk. We'll see.
Have
It
you heard
was
anything
very
yet? Nothing
last
yet?
minute.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. In fact, I know a number of people that were a little upset because the talks, they said the due date was like June 9th or something like that. And
Yeah.
usually when you see that, people assume like it means like midnight that day. And the talk cutoff ended up being like 2 in the afternoon.
Oh wow,
And there
I
was
didn't know that.
nothing on the
I
website.
did
Yeah.
it literally at like 9 a.m. on that
Yeah.
day.
So yeah, you were probably like right under the wire, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, I'll do it after work today," and then they got home and they're like, "No, it's too late." So that's too bad. I think I can. I think it's probably okay for me to say that at Unreal Fest, I'll be teaching MetaHuman Animator in the learning lab, which will be really fun. Had a good time with that last year, and again, shout out to Jacob for subbing in for me for one of the courses I was supposed to be TAing but couldn't. That was a good time. Go back and watch our Unreal Fest episode to hear all our fun stories from that.
I got to find a way to heist another one of the instructor shirts this year.
Yeah.
Though it was on our system last year, so maybe I can pull it off. I'm very excited for Unreal Fest again. It's back in New Orleans. For those folks who are considering it when registration goes live, I would definitely do it. It's a good time. It's a great community. The events are a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend it. Just don't steal my restaurant reservations, otherwise I'll be upset. I'll also be at SIGGRAPH in August, so that's coming up pretty soon. We're about 6 weeks away. The company I work for is going big. We'll have a big booth, so if folks are interested in meeting up, let us know. We'll be doing a Birds of the Feather, which is kind of like a roundtable discussion at SIGGRAPH on real time in VFX. So if that interests you, check that out. But yeah.
Yeah, I was invited to help lead a Birds of a Feather at SIGGRAPH this year for VR theater, which I would love to do, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it out to SIGGRAPH for August. So that's a little bit TBD for me. I do want to give a quick mention to a couple of the events that I've been at the past week. For anyone who happens to be in the New York City area or ever coming to New York City, these events are over, but they happen usually like every month. So I was fortunate to give talks at an Unreal Engine social mixer, which was a very nice mix of like virtual production, VR, and education people. And that was amazing. The food was amazing. All the people were amazing. And then I mentioned the Unity event, which was also very cool. And then I spoke at an event called NYVR, which I've been a part of since back in 2014 or something like that. And so that's back and bigger than ever. And a lot of these events, it feels like they're finally revving up post-pandemic and getting nice attendance and all that. And then I also spoke on Wednesday night at 3D New York, which is a meetup that usually has people in the ArcViz community and architecture, and saw a great presentation from Mengi Fan of Shop Architects. And then I got to speak about some of the stuff that my company's up to, and finally got to talk a little bit more about our crazy Austin project that has so many brilliant people working on it, because there's an article that came out that I'll very quickly just show a moment of for anyone who's watching the stream. It actually goes into pretty good detail about how this $300 million worth of amenities are set up in this VR experience that has been, down the pipe has been like Jonathan Kuhn as the client, D-Box as the creative director and the folks making all these beautiful renders, PureBlink as the folks translating these beautiful renders into beautiful Unreal Engine VR scenes, and then my company compiling all this and assembling this on site to be something that can be explorable in multiplayer in the holodeck, as it's called, but it's just a big giant showroom that has been attracting a lot of interest from people.
This
is what cool. A funicular elevator looks like. That's something I didn't know.
Yeah, so that's like another level of rich, man. I want to go there.
I know. And I believe we're going to be able to do a really nice breakdown of this at Unreal Fest. I think we'll have Neil Griffiths from D-Box, Jose Uribe from PureBlink, and myself just giving like a nice hour-long breakdown of all the crazy Unreal Engine challenges and VR elements of making all this happen. So look forward to that.
Cool. Who'd you say did the renders for those?
D-Box and Matthew Bannister leading them.
Very cool.
Yeah. Been a fan of them for many, many years. So it's cool to be working with them.
Yeah. All right. I think we're just about at our usual hour 20 mark, which is incredible how we always end up here. But thank you guys for listening. If you've made it this far, we really appreciate all the support we've been getting. Definitely like, subscribe, rate, whatever it is you're doing, because it's working. All right. And feel free to leave us comments, suggestions for future episodes of the podcast. We'll do our best to try and keep being consistent. I like this weekly thing. We should really just set a specific date. Let us know if you'd prefer less chaos and a specific date for us to record these. I can't guarantee release, but at least record them. And, maybe we'll do that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I really wanted to make a pun about chaos or chaos flesh, the physics stuff in Unreal, but nothing came to mind. So
nothing came to mind. All right. It's implied. It's implied.
Yeah. But let us know if you like chaos flesh or if you prefer more stable releases of these episodes.
Physics, yeah.
Stable diffusion, neural pathways, neural AI, machine learning.
That's a stretch. All right. See you guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.